Stemming the flow of heroin to the West. A rare look at Iran's costly battle against drug traffickers.
This is Worldview with CNN's Bernard Shaw and Judy Woodruff in Washington.
Thank you for joining us. Bernie is off. These stories are also ahead. Airlines around the world are notified that some of their jet engines may have damaged parts. And how El Nino could affect this year's hurricane season. But first, a major snag is threatening to derail the Northern Ireland peace process after months of difficult negotiations. The main Protestant group in the multi-party talks says that it will not accept the latest peace plan. CNN's Richard Blystone has more from Belfast.
The chairman knew everyone would dislike some of his proposals, but the Ulster Unionists made that an understatement.
What we want to see is an agreement which we can support, and we represent the majority of people in Northern Ireland. We're not going to sign up to a document which is effectively a charter for a united Ireland.
That brought British Prime Minister Tony Blair flying from London to reassure the Protestants of Northern Ireland's biggest party that they can get a package they can sell to their voters.
I feel the hand of history upon our shoulder in respect of this. I really do. And I just think we need to acknowledge that and respond to it. Now, maybe it's impossible to find a way through. Maybe even with the best faith in the world, you can't do it. But it's right to try.
It won't be Mr. Blair's last emergency, said the Irish nationalist leader Gerry Adams.
This whole question will be the hardest test that Tony Blair will ever face in his term as Prime Minister, or indeed in his terms as Prime Minister.
But with just 2 days to go, nobody was ready to despair.
It's a comprehensive document which has positive elements in it, but it's also got elements in it with which we have major differences, and we believe that we have to discuss those differences and try and get agreement on them from all the other parties.
Still, even as the politicians struggled toward a settlement, work started Tuesday on a new so-called peace wall in Belfast, 20 feet high across the field and between the houses to separate a mostly Irish nationalist neighborhood from one where Protestant unionists fly the British flag.
I don't call it a peace line because it'll not bring peace. What I'm calling it is a security barrier to secure and protect the people that's living there.
The neighborhood has seen more than its share of sectarian violence. But Joe, a young householder on the Catholic side, says the wall will not only spoil his view and the value of his house, it'll classify him, and he doesn't want to be.
You see that the walls don't help, build bridges between people. They are walls, and all they're going to do is cause problems.
It will cost British taxpayers $250,000. Around Belfast, there are walls like this, communities ever more segregated even as the talks go on. They do provide a measure of protection for those on the front line, but they are also a temptation. And whether or not these talks get over their latest hurdle, there will not be real peace in Northern Ireland until the walls come down in people's minds. Judy?
Richard, given this latest snag, what is next in this process?
Well, I think we can look forward tomorrow to more politicking, more finger-pointing, more urgent meetings with the British and Irish prime ministers on the part of all the parties. In short, more of what we have seen for months. The parties here waiting until somebody else puts down a paper for them rather than negotiating with each other, waiting until someone puts down a paper and then deciding whether they want to reject it or accept it. These are grave hours for the talks process, Judy.
All right, Richard Blystone reporting from Belfast in Northern Ireland. A little later, we will take a closer look at the Northern Ireland talks in an interview with Ulster Unionist negotiator Jeffrey Donaldson. Two troubling warnings about the safety of some commercial airline equipment. First, the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board is recommending inspections of the fuel monitoring systems of 3 series of Boeing 747s. The NTSB found damaged wiring in the wreckage of TWA Flight 800 and in 3 retired Boeing 747s. Meanwhile, jet engine manufacturer Pratt & Whitney is warning 15 commercial airliners that some turbine blades sold by their company may be defective. Pratt & Whitney says a malfunctioning cleaning machine may have made the blades susceptible to developing dangerous cracks. We'll have more on this story at the bottom of the hour. Despite recent signs of improvements in U.S.-Iranian relations, CNN has learned that Washington is about to accuse Tehran of continuing to support international terrorism. CNN World Affairs correspondent Ralph Begleiter reports on the conflict in U.S. government policy towards Iran.
An Iranian wrestling team on a sightseeing trip to Washington, D.C. More evidence of slowly improving relations between the U.S. and Iran, stemming from the election of a new Iranian government last year. But CNN has learned the Clinton administration will soon accuse that new government of continuing as the world's most active state sponsor of terrorism. The U.S. government's terrorism experts tell CNN Iran continues to be involved in the planning and execution of terrorist acts. As part of the glacial thaw in relations, Iran's new ambassador to the United Nations was allowed for the first time to travel to Southern California last week.
The tone of some United States officials towards Iran has changed positively in certain limited instances. However, on a practical level, and with the exception of some minor steps, the United States policies remains stagnant.
The United States accuses Iran of carrying out at least 13 political assassination attempts last year. Even since Mohammad Khatami became Iran's president, Washington says Iran continues tracking and plotting to kill exiles who oppose Islamic leaders in Tehran, continues its global death threat against British author Salman Rushdie for his writings on Islam, and continues supporting Hezbollah in southern Lebanon and Hamas inside Israel, which has staged spectacular terrorist bombing attacks in recent years.
It is only prudent and responsible that as we look towards what they are doing and whether they are changing their actions, for us to be studying very carefully what they are doing.
CNN has learned that while Iran remains a suspect in the 1996 bombing of a U.S. military apartment building in Saudi Arabia, there is a battle within the Clinton administration over how to deal with Iran's new government. Cultural and sports exchanges and similar gestures are being kept separate from political rapprochement.
He's saying that I'm a sportsman and I'm the head of the team here, and I only talk about the aspects of the sports, not a politician. I leave the politician to our foreign ministry and our government to make the decision on this case.
U.S. officials are torn by conflicting policy goals, ending 2 decades of estrangement with a major power in the Gulf while upholding Washington's commitment to combat international terrorism. Ralph Begleiter, CNN at the State Department.
Separately, in an unprecedented move, the Iranian government is taking Western journalists to the front line in its war against drug smugglers. As CNN's Christiane Amanpour explains, Tehran is appealing for international assistance.
One of the world's busiest drug routes runs through Iran's Rocky Mountains and desert plains. For its eastern border lies alongside Afghanistan and Pakistan, which produce 80% of the world's heroin and opium, drugs destined for users in the West. They are smuggled through Iran. This is the front line in Iran's war against the drug traffickers, its frontiers with Pakistan and Afghanistan. Along nearly 2,000 kilometers of borderline, Iran has built concrete walls, dams, canals, and earthen barriers. These have stopped the caravans of trucks and other vehicles that used to drive freely across the border, but still the smugglers come on foot and by camel. For the past 10 years, Iran has waged this battle alone, spending hundreds of millions of dollars and deploying tens of thousands of troops. But now, the head of the United Nations Drug Control Program has come to offer international aid.
I know very few countries in the world who are investing so many resources than Iran in fighting drug traffic. But if Iran is not helped, if Iran is left alone, the traffic will grow and the number of addicts will grow all over Western Europe.
It is a humanitarian issue. As we battle on the front lines of the drug war, we ask for help from the whole world.
Law enforcement officers say they need things as basic as night vision goggles and modern radios to monitor Iran's vast border. Officials show the UN some of the heavy weapons they've captured from the smugglers, a memorial to the 2,500 troops they've lost in this effort, and the drugs they've confiscated, most of them destined for Western markets. This Tehran drug depot is one of the biggest in the world. And every so often, officials conduct a ritual burning as a public demonstration of Iran's commitment to fight the drug trade. Iranian officials from the president on down reiterated that commitment in meetings with the UN drug boss, but they say unless they do get vital international assistance, they may have to reduce their border control efforts. And if that happens, the UN estimates about 20% more drugs would immediately reach Western markets from the producers in neighboring Afghanistan. Christiane Amanpour, CNN, on Iran's eastern border.
Coming up on CNN Worldview, the ceremonial pilgrimage to Mecca reaches its peak. Wildfires are causing widespread devastation in Indonesia. And new health guidelines on the B vitamin known as folic acid. Are women getting enough? The annual pilgrimage to the Saudi city of Mecca, known as the Hajj, is coming to a close. Tuesday, throngs of Muslim pilgrims circled the Kaaba, a great stone monument, 7 times. The pilgrims will circle the Kaaba again on Thursday as a farewell. This year, more than 2 million Muslims took part in the Hajj. Returning now to our top story, efforts are underway to save the fragile Northern Ireland peace process after the main Protestant faction, the Ulster Unionist Party, rejected the latest peace proposal. The plan had been drafted by the chairman of the talks, former United States Senator George Mitchell. He wants the parties to reach a deal by Thursday. A short while ago, I talked to Ulster Unionist negotiator Jeffrey Donaldson, and I asked him what is wrong with the Mitchell plan.
The document in its present form does not provide a basis for agreement, and we have urged the government to think again about the proposals that they have put forward to see if some progress can be made.
But you say you and the other parties, but isn't it primarily the Unionists who are complaining at this point?
Well, ourselves and other Unionist parties who are in the talks process, plus the Alliance Party, have indicated varying degrees of concern about this document. So we're not the only one with a problem. But at the end of the day, if there is to be agreement in Northern Ireland, that agreement must command the support of both Unionists and Nationalists. And we're being honest and open with people in saying that on the basis of this document, Unionists are not likely, indeed will not give their agreement to the proposals set out in the document.
But haven't the Unionists been involved in these negotiations? You've been involved. How is it that suddenly you and others are saying this has radically gone off in the wrong direction?
Well, I think you'll have to ask George Mitchell that. He's the one who brought forward the document. We sat with George Mitchell for weeks. We explained our position to him. I don't understand why he's gone off at such a tangent. I think you've got to look to the influence of the two governments, most especially the Irish government, who over the past week have been toughening their position. The Irish Prime Minister said last week that he wasn't prepared for any more compromise. Well, it's that kind of attitude that has got us into the stalemate that we're in today. And clearly, if we're to make progress, then there has to be compromise.
But won't there have to be give on all sides?
Of course, but the problem with this document is that it's all give on one side and take on the other. we need a balanced agreement if both unionists and nationalists are able to sign up to it. At the moment, the proposals in the document are totally unbalanced as far as unionists are concerned, and that kind of unbalanced situation will not lead to an agreement.
Your concern, as I understand it, has to do with the North-South body giving too much power to the Irish government, too much legislative power. Is that at the heart of your concern?
Well, it's one of the main concerns. It's not exclusively our concern. There are other issues in the document that are also a concern to us, and we've made those issues and outlined those problems to the Prime Minister earlier this evening.
Will the Prime Minister be able to resolve this? I mean, Prime Minister Blair.
Well, that remains to be seen. We've asked the Prime Minister to look at these proposals. We've asked him to talk to his Irish counterpart, the Irish Prime Minister, and we'll wait and see what progress is made. But we also need to talk, and have been all day, talking to other parties here at the talks to see if we can find a way forward. And we will continue to do that right up to the deadline.
How much pressure do you feel to make an agreement?
Well, I think we all feel pressure to try and reach agreement, but at the end of the day it has to be an agreement which people are happy with, because if we're not happy with that agreement, then the people who support us will not vote for it.
What do you think the odds are that an agreement will be reached?
Well, based on the proposals in this document, very, very slim indeed. But if people are prepared to compromise, then we may be able to make progress, and there is a chance we could reach agreement. But the chances are diminishing as the deadline approaches.
And if no agreement, will there be more violence?
Well, we have violence at the minute, and that's unfortunate. And it would be very unfortunate if we do have continuing violence. But at the end of the day, we've got to try and move the political process forward in Northern Ireland. Unfortunately, there are people in our society who engage in violence, just as there are in other societies in the world. We've got to try and isolate those people and at the same time build a political settlement which commands the support of the Democratic majority in Northern Ireland.
Jeffrey Donaldson of the Ulster Unionist Party, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And coming up on Worldview, toxic air and charred land in Indonesia as thousands of acres go up in flames. And why one part of the world may be welcoming back El Niño this year. Tuesday marks World Health Day, and this year some experts are focusing on safe motherhood. A conference here in Washington will address the issue and offer solutions involving governments and businesses. Each year, 50 million women suffer health complications during pregnancy that too often end in death. CNN's Jonathan Karl reports.
The miracle of life means death for too many mothers in the developing world. Every minute, a woman dies because of complications in pregnancy, a total of 585,000 women a year. According to a new study by the World Health Organization, almost 90% of those deaths occur in Asia and sub-Saharan Africa.
Unfortunately, it is a matter of some situations where women are almost expected to die during pregnancy. If 1 in 10 women are dying in some villages due to pregnancy-related causes, it's almost taken for granted.
A coalition of international health organizations has dubbed 1998 the Year of Safe Motherhood and launched a drive to reduce the maternal mortality rate by half by the year 2000. To accomplish that, the groups are calling for aid agencies and multinational corporations to fund programs that support maternal care.
In many cultures, pregnancy is considered just a normal course of events. Women don't get special care, they don't eat special foods, and we're trying to change that situation.
The 3 leading causes of maternal death are severe bleeding, infection, and unsafe abortion. It's an issue First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton has repeatedly addressed on trips to the developing world. Although it fares better, in the U.S. there are approximately 300 pregnancy-related deaths a year. The World Bank is trying to convince businesses that healthy mothers mean a healthy economy.
In many countries, we are beginning to see program action, more midwives trained, more women who are delivering in institutions, but it takes time.
Healthier mothers also means healthier babies. 2/3 of infant deaths occur during the first month of life and are caused either because the mother was in poor health or received inadequate care during delivery. Jonathan Karl, CNN, Washington.
Forest fires that have been raging for months are inflicting a heavy toll on Indonesia. Despite the best efforts of locals, the government, and international volunteers, the stubborn fires continue to burn out of control. So far, an area 3 times the size of Singapore has been blackened. Some hurricane forecasters say El Nino will soon be a fading memory. CNN's John Zarrella reports on how that is likely to affect the Atlantic hurricane season, which opens on June 1st.
Ravaged by wind and rain and tornadoes, residents of California and the southeastern United States couldn't wait until El Nino lost its punch. Now that the weather phenomenon appears to be fading, people who live in hurricane-prone areas may soon wish it was back.
El Nino is a good guy in this regard. It makes it for a quieter hurricane season.
That's what happened last season. But Chris Lancy and Colorado State University professor Bill Gray, who annually collaborate on a hurricane season forecast, don't expect a repeat.
This kind of wedge of colder than normal waters is starting to push eastward. So as that pushes eastward, the El Nino fades.
Last summer, only a handful of storms formed. Strong winds created by El Nino blew across the Atlantic. Those winds tore the tops off developing storms, keeping them from organizing into hurricanes. With El Nino fading, the shearing winds should end too. That leads Gray and Lancy to forecast at least 10 tropical storms will form, 6 of them becoming hurricanes, an average year.
Our best estimate at this point is that El Nino will fade to near normal conditions by the heart of the hurricane season, August, September, October.
Of course, where weather is concerned, nothing is a certainty. Gray and Lancy say if El Nino effects linger, the upcoming tropical season may still be a washout. Atmospheric scientist Terry Faber agrees.
The fact that this El Nino is forecasted to be about neutral, maybe a little bit still above normal come this hurricane season, we do expect slightly below normal hurricane activity this fall.
But hurricane forecasters caution that looking at numbers alone can be misleading and sometimes lead to a false sense of security. 1992 was an El Nino year. The first named storm of the season didn't develop until August. Unfortunately, that storm was Andrew, the worst natural disaster in U.S. history. John Zarrella, CNN, Miami.
Straight ahead on Worldview, why experts say a healthy dose of folic acid in your diet is a good thing, especially if you're a woman. And the maker of the jet engines that power some of the world's most popular airplanes issues a recall. More than a dozen air carriers are warned they may have received potentially defective engine parts.
This is Worldview with CNN's Bernard Shaw and Judy Woodruff in Washington.
Hello and welcome. Bernie is off. Also ahead, will the U.S. Social Security program be solvent for the baby boomer generation? U.S. President Clinton wants to know what his country thinks. And the world of country music mourns the death of a pioneer. 2 warnings have been issued concerning the safety of some passenger jets. The U.S. National Transportation Safety Board is urging immediate inspections for the oldest Boeing 747s. The agency says damaged wiring found aboard the doomed TWA Flight 800 and several other planes may exist in other Boeing 747s. The other warning involves a possible defect in some jet engines. As CNN's Christine Negroni reports, that word came from the engine's manufacturer.
In a sweeping alert, more than a dozen airlines were warned that they might have a problem with their engine parts. The warning from Pratt & Whitney followed the discovery that a malfunctioning cleaning machine might have damaged thousands of engine fan blades, making them likely to develop cracks. Delta, Northwest, and United were among those carriers checking to see if any of the blades might be found on their planes. But in the end, only 8 engines in service had the suspect parts.
We know where they all are. They've all been taken out of service and they've been returned to us.
It's warning to customers, and an FAA inspection of the process seems to have caught the problem. And the FAA concluded both Pratt & Whitney and the affected airlines acted responsibly.
No operator is going to operate an engine that would have a potential for a mechanical failure.
The subject of engine reliability is a high-profile one among air safety officials, especially since 1996, when an engine on a Delta plane in Florida tore apart, hurling into the passenger cabin and killing a woman on board. The FAA announced last year it intended to begin a more high-tech inspection and maintenance program for all turbofan aircraft engines, a program scheduled to begin in 1998. Christine Negroni, CNN, New York.
According to the Wall Street Journal, the planes affected by the warning include Boeing 747s, 757s, 767s, and 777s, as well as DC-10s, MD-11s, and MD-90s. The suspect engines are also used in Airbus Industries models A, 300, 310, 320, and 330 jetliners. U.S. President Bill Clinton has kicked off a series of town hall meetings on Social Security. The first one was held in Kansas City, Missouri, Tuesday. Mr. Clinton says there is a looming crisis involving the retirement system because the United States is facing the biggest number of retirees ever.
To my fellow baby boomers, let me say that none of us wants our own retirement to be a burden to our children and to their efforts to raise our grandchildren. It would be unconscionable if we fail to act, and act now, as one nation, renewing the ties that bind us across the generations.
The federal government predicts that unless there are changes, the Social Security system will likely run out of cash by the year 2029. One proposed plan would allow workers themselves to invest their Social Security taxes. But CNN's Gary Tuckman reports not everyone likes the idea.
Aldervin Daly works in the private sector, helping to bring the arts to school children. He describes himself as not wealthy, but financially comfortable. But his feelings about Social Security and the efforts to reform the system?
It makes me uncomfortable.
One of the changes being discussed for the system would have individuals investing their Social Security taxes directly into the stock and bond markets. So why would that make a young man uncomfortable? Well, because of this woman.
I thought everybody using their money that big.
This is Aldervin Daly's mother, who remembers the stock market crash of 1929 vividly. Lena Daly is 89 years old now and lives in a nursing home partially paid for with Social Security. She has never gotten over doubts about the market and has never forgotten what happened to some of her friends and family.
They cried. And they didn't want to tell nobody about it.
Lena Daly's life experiences and the experiences of many others of her generation have a profound effect on her son.
At least if it's in the government trust, we have a sense of it being there. And they have to, that it will be there for the future. Can't guarantee that, but it's not, as people use it, but at least it's going in. It's not like there are some people wheeling and dealing on it and, might go out and buy South American gold mines that end up being full of coal.
While the future of Social Security reform is still uncertain, the Securities and Exchange Commission is holding frequent town meetings to teach people about savings and investment.
It's up to individuals to learn how to protect themselves, to ask the tough questions about what's going on out there.
Aldervin Daly says he's prepared to do all that and adds he'll try to keep his mind open about the possibility of managing his own Social Security portfolio.
There's a level of it which I say, at first I go, well, I could sort of figure out what to do with part of it if I was left to sort of make some of those decisions.
Aldervin Daly and his mother Lena will be two of many Americans paying close attention as the Social Security reform debate heats up. Gary Tuckman, CNN, New York.
Important news about women and folic acid. Experts have long been concerned that women of childbearing age are not getting enough of the B vitamin in their diet to protect against birth defects. CNN's Eugenia Halsey reports on some new recommendations.
7-year-old Margaret Frederick leads a busy life from a wheelchair. She was born with spina bifida, a defect of the spinal column that keeps her from walking.
It is obviously different because, not being able to walk, there are, barriers, but she's, an active child.
Still, her mother says what doctors know today about prevention might have been helpful.
I wish I had known about it 7 years ago.
Now, an expert panel put together by the National Academy of Sciences says women can reduce their chances of having a child with spina bifida, in which the spinal column doesn't completely close, by getting an extra 400 micrograms of folic acid a day, either through fortified foods or supplements, or a combination of the two.
Because development of the central nervous system occurs in the first month of pregnancy, before many women even know they are pregnant, it is especially critical that women take this extra folic acid prior to conception and during the first month of pregnancy.
Since the beginning of the year, the government has been requiring food companies to add folic acid to grain products such as cereal, bread, pasta, and rice. So the panel says it is possible for a woman to get what she needs from her diet, but it takes some planning. For example, in addition to foods that naturally contain folate, such as orange juice and broccoli, she needs to eat foods that have been fortified with folic acid, such as 2 servings a day of fortified cereal, plus 7 slices a day of bread, and 1 serving of rice. Or she could take a multivitamin, which would also provide the recommended 400 micrograms a day.
Evidence of the need for extra folic acid has been mounting for the past decade, but this is the most specific guidance yet on how much of it women need and how they should get it. Eugenia Halsey, CNN, Washington. Ahead on Worldview, the gloves come off in Washington as the Clinton administration spars with a leading Republican over ethics. Later, what are some of the healthiest people in the United States doing with their money? You are looking at videotape from Texas, where we are just getting word that a loaded school bus has collided with a tractor-trailer truck on a highway. Authorities say that some of the children aboard the bus are seriously injured. The Texas Department of Public Safety says the accident happened about 4:30 Texas time on U.S. Highway 290 near Chapel Hill, which is about 60 miles north of Houston. A top U.S. Republican lambasted President Clinton this week, questioning Mr. Clinton's ethics and suggesting that he should resign. The White House launched a vigorous counterattack Tuesday, which included barbs at Whitewater Independent Counsel Ken Starr. CNN senior White House correspondent Wolf Blitzer has more.
House Majority Leader Dick Armey says he's sticking with his toughest comments to date about President Clinton. I believe he's a shameless person, he told high school students outside Dallas on Monday. If it were me that had documented personal conduct along the lines of the president's, I would be so filled with shame that I would resign. This president won't do that. His basic credo in life is, I will do whatever I can get away with. He elaborated on Tuesday.
I do think that it's important to emphasize with young people that they do have consequences to their behavior. They should accept the responsibility of their behavior. And we should hold the President of the United States to the same standard that we would hold ourselves, or to coaches, or to teachers, or to heads of corporations.
President, do you have anything to say to Dick Armey today? I hope he had a nice day.
In Kansas City, the president shrugged off a reporter's question. But back at the White House, his aides launched a counterattack.
Well, like we say in Texas, if goofy ideas ever go to $40 a barrel, I want the drilling rights to Dick Armey's head. He just comes up with these goofy notions, and it's just a partisan attempt, I think, from the right-wing Republicans to form an alliance with Ken Starr in a very partisan investigation, try to use it for their partisan advantage.
Listen carefully to Begala's words because they underscore a fundamental White House strategy. Link any Republican attack to independent counsel Ken Starr. Mr. Clinton's aides are now trying to preemptively trash Starr's expected report to Congress that could lead to impeachment proceedings. That strategy worked last year in undermining Senator Fred Thompson's report on Democratic Party fundraising abuses.
Every time we see a Republican leader in Congress hit the president
or an approach made by the independent counsel indicating more hardball with the White House, you're going to see the White House hit back quickly, hit back hard, and at least up to now, it hasn't backfired on them at all.
But there may be an important difference this time. Little new information emerged from Thompson's report. Most of it had come out during public hearings or had been leaked to the news media. Starr's report will be based on secret grand jury testimony that may or may not remain secret. Wolf Blitzer, CNN, the White House.
On Wall Street, just one day after the Dow closed above 9,000 points, investors are cashing in on some of their profits. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell more than 76 points Tuesday, closing at 89.56. The Nasdaq also closed lower, down more than 30 points, finishing at 1798. Despite all that, the surging stock market has helped make many of the rich even richer. And instead of amassing their fortunes, some of today's billionaires are giving much of it away. CNN's Garrick Utley looks at the changing face of philanthropy.
At first glance, our faces may not express it, and our bank accounts may not reflect it. But Americans today are the wealthiest society in the history of the world. And what are some doing with that wealth?
When I found out this morning the UN can't accept a gift, I thought, well, God is trying to tell me not to give my money.
If you have made your money in media like Ted Turner, you might pledge $1 billion to United Nations programs over the next 10 years.
I don't think that I'm just a man capable of making money. And I wouldn't think much of myself if that's all I were.
If you are George Soros and have made your fortune in financial speculation, you might pledge $500 million to programs in Russia over the next 3 years.
And then there are the rest of us. 69% of Americans give an average of $1,000 a year to nonprofit causes. And as wealth continues to grow, so will the amount of giving, particularly as right now we are on the verge of the greatest transfer of wealth in the history of the nation.
That wealth came from a generation that saved and invested in a growing economy and can now pass it on.
We're in the middle or beginning of a transfer of wealth to the baby boomer generation from the previous generation that has been estimated at different levels, but about $10 trillion.
In addition to that, even greater wealth, new wealth, is coming from new industries and at a younger age than ever before. The model was set when capitalists like Henry Ford used much of their fortunes to establish foundations. John D. Rockefeller created his foundation in 1913. It has had a major impact on medical and biological research. And Andrew Carnegie helped to finance the public library system across the nation.
No other country in the world has anything like the array of private philanthropic foundations that the United States has. That's cool.
And there will be more of them like Bill Gates Foundation, whose giving so far largely reflects his business. More than $200 million to bring the internet into libraries and laptops into schools.
We are now right on the edge of the second great wave. And this one, in terms of magnitude, is something for which there's never been any precedent.
Critics point to the growing imbalance of wealth between the rich and the poor, as well as the increasingly squeezed middle class. That's why the very wealthy have long understood not only the need to give away much of their fortunes, but also the wisdom of doing it.
It is the way the system worked at the beginning of the century to the benefit of the nation when wealth came from new companies like Ford. And it is working again at the end of it. Garrick Utley, CNN, New York.
Coming up on Worldview, fans mourn the death of a country music star. A funeral for country music's first lady will be held Thursday in Nashville, Tennessee. As CNN's Charles Ziwi reports, singer Tammy Wynette is being remembered in her hometown and across the U.S. as an American original.
Friends and family gathered Tuesday at the Nashville home where country singer Tammy Wynette died in her sleep. Among mourners, George Jones, her third of 5 husbands and most famous duet partner.
I will take
if we're right or wrong.
Jones said in a statement, "Life is too short. In the end, we were very close friends, and now I have lost that friend. I couldn't be sadder."
The big news in Nashville today is Tammy Wynette passed away last night, and
on the radio, the woman known as the Queen of Heartache was remembered for being down to earth.
Run out of gas. I was walking to the gas station. She stopped and picked me up and took me to get gas.
Along Nashville's Music Row, fans looked past her stormy marriages, hospital stays, bankruptcy, and a still unsolved claim that she was once kidnapped, recalling instead the Tammy who recorded 50 albums and sold more than 30 million records. Here she is at the Country Music Awards show of 1968, only 3 years after she decided to leave her job as a beautician.
Big loss, yes, very definitely. Everybody really liked Tammy because she was always friendly and nice to her fans.
Music industry executive Connie Bradley said Wynette was a pioneer for women in the workplace with the song that became her anthem.
I'm sure there are many times when women wanted to walk out and throw their hands up and give up, that when they thought about, stand by your man or stand by your man just a little bit longer may have made the difference.
Despite the fact she was a country music pioneer of sorts, Tammy Wynette isn't a member of the Country Music Hall of Fame. But people who know country music say it won't be long before she is. Norol Wilson was one of Wynette's longtime songwriters and producers.
She's left a mark in our musical society that's going to be terribly missed. And a style, a sound, and with the beauty of her being the person she is, it's gonna be rough. It'll be rough.
I can hear the rain, it's falling softly.
Charles Zegwe, CNN, Nashville.
I'm Lou Dobbs in New York, and coming right up on Moneyline, more profit warnings plague Wall Street the day after topping 9,000. The Dow Jones Industrials give up all of yesterday's gains and then some. Also tonight, Xerox's drastic moves to save money by cutting 9,000 jobs. We'll have that story for you, and we'll have the first television interview with the men behind the mega deal, Travelers Group's Sandy Weil and Citicorp's John Reed. Please join us for Moneyline coming right up. Now back to Worldview and Judy Woodruff. Judy?
Thanks, Lou. We will be watching. Some new findings are raising expectations of life elsewhere in the universe. The European Space Agency says water has been discovered on Titan, the largest moon orbiting the planet Saturn. The discovery has generated much excitement because researchers say Titan may duplicate the conditions that led to the creation of life on Earth. In Northern California, a baby deer is recovering from a frightening ordeal. This newborn spent 2 days trapped in a cold, wet storm drain. Its cries attracted a resident who called for help, and a rescue worker pulled the fawn to safety. The animal is now recuperating at a wildlife retreat. A happy ending. That's all for Worldview. I'm Judy Woodruff. Thanks for joining us.